Good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar on how to modernize legacy applications and enhance agility with CDW and IBM. I'm Kim Johnson with the CDW Solutions and Services Marketing Team. Before we get started, I just wanted to mention a few quick housekeeping items. One, we will save time for Q&A at the end, so if you have questions, please drop those in the chat throughout the presentation and we'll talk through them at the end. And then after the webinar ends, you'll be prompted to complete a short survey. It's going to open automatically in your browser, and it's just a few quick questions. If you wouldn't mind giving us some feedback about today's experience, we would very much appreciate it. Our hosts today are Greg Peters, Chief Innovation Architect for Software Engineering at CDW, and Sebastian Porro, Principal Automation Technical Specialist for Application Development at IBM. And now, without further ado, take it away, Greg.
Awesome. Thank you, Kim. Well, good morning or good afternoon, wherever you're at. Happy to be here on the call. We're going to go through a few things on how CDW looks at modernization. But before we do that, let's go through a quick agenda. We're going to cover getting started on how modernization takes shape and form, some problems with it, some of using SAMA for better outcomes, some in-depth analysis and reporting that SAMA provides. And then we're going to turn it over to Sebastian. He's going to go over some of IBM's stance on how they go through modernization as well. So let's get started. So when we look at applications, what we find are typically they're like code bases or like attics, right? Where you just throw a bunch of stuff in the attic and you kind of think about it and you get back to it at some point in the future. You may or may not want to remove things from your attic because there's just a lot of stuff there. And so code bases are very much similar to that. And so when we look at modernization, we have to really understand what the true nature is, what the problem domain is, and then how to address each and every aspect of the portfolio in a better, more holistic manner as we go through modernization. So we have a lot of problems with modernization, as I'm sure anybody that's ever dealt with it realizes. And one of the primary issues we face is modernization is a continuous journey, right? So basically, you can never be complete with modernization because ultimately it's a continuous cycle. But we have another problem, which is in order to break the cycle, you have to look at, well, how can I be more efficient and more productive? And so you have to increase the learning efficiency of an organization, the flexibility of an organization, foster a culture of innovation, and the turnaround and regularly, this is an important one here, regularly assess your applications for modernization in the future, right? So you can't just modernize an application and be done with it. What we're saying here is that it's a continuous cycle, and then you have to have the culture and processes in place to be able to continuously track that modernization journey to make sure you're efficient at it. There's a different counterintuitive point, which is when you do modernization, sometimes there are several options, okay? You can have an application that could be partially retired, some of it can be refactored or rewritten. And so it's not just one application can go one specific pathway. Sometimes it's many different pathways for one application, all right? The other issue is that modernization, when you go through a rationalization process, is a very manual process. It's really slow. And so if I were to ask anybody that has done modernization or worked with the agency or any other consulting firm, you have to answer questionnaires. It takes a lot of time to do that. And so we don't really want our clients to have to do that because you have to talk to each one of these individuals. So if it's an architect or an engineer in DevOps or a security person or whoever, it takes a long time to do that. And so we've ran some analysis on this, and we've determined that based on a per application rationalization using all of the SAMA data, that is extremely costly. Why is that? Because it takes about $30,000 on average to complete modernization, okay? And this is just manual assessments. These are meetings, emails, phone calls across all of these individuals. It takes a tremendous amount of time to do that, all right? And it's obviously costly. The reality is there's not just one application. You have probably hundreds. I will tell you the last client I had worked with here recently was 3,000 applications. The estimated manual cost based on the metrics we've scanned through with SAMA is about, I think it's like $3 million or $4 million or something to do that for those applications on average for them to do it manually, all right? That is a tremendous, tremendous amount of cost as you move forward. The other reality is modernization, it can be counterintuitive, which is, and you can see I've kind of torn the sheet on this, is because you can get frustrated at modernization because things that you may think are important, right? So let's say we take a monolithic application and try to decompose it into many different components, it can be more costly. And that is a counterintuitive to most people because when you deal with an application that has 50 different parts and then you have to turn around and have all those parts connect together through API gateways or what have you, it gets overly complicated in terms of cost of supportability, but also in cost of response per second, especially if you're dealing with cloud functions or Lambda or whatever, right? So monoliths, deploying those to the cloud can be intuitive. So we're going to introduce you to SAMA and how we think about these problems in a different way. So SAMA is a multidiscipline application rationalization service that CDW provides. It's proprietary to CDW, and it allows us to analyze applications at any level across all of the source code they have in an organization. So if you've got mergers and acquisitions or divestitures you're dealing with, or you've got internal developers or third-party agencies that are developing code for you, or even some COTS stuff at some level, we can do that analysis. And it allows us to do it faster than what we ever thought was possible in the past, where it would take 12 to 18 months on average to analyze these applications. We can do them in a matter of weeks, and that's really important. So if we look at modernization, you can't just look at it at one simple fact, which is that it can't just be always cloud. It can't always be in a just data center. Sometimes it's everywhere. And so, about 7 years ago, we said, is there a better way to do this? And our answer was yes, we can. So SAMA actually works across all of these platforms. So we can look at mainframe with COBOL. We can look at AS400s. We can look at distributed applications in the data center. We can look at all of the cloud vendors, right? And better optimize them either if you've already started modernization 10 years ago, or if you're just starting out, we can show you your progression over time. So remember me telling you earlier that you need to assess that modernization because it's continuous. SAMA assesses this continuously across the board, all right? And so we can actually scan the source code in all these platforms and give you a better stake at your outcome. So the modernization outcomes that we choose are some of the 6 or 7 R's you typically hear about, which are these numbers at the bottom. And these are our proprietary scanning technology inside of SAMA. And we're looking at these numbers as a particular security issues, for example, or cognitive or cyclomatic complexity, or a number of different factors. And those factors increment these counters on the bottom, which get you to that better potential outcome. And you may ask, well, why are the retire numbers almost identical to the rewrite? And the reality is that if you were to retire an application, you get a lot of value because you don't spend a lot of money doing anything with it, right? Likewise, if you rewrite an application, you get a better outcome because you get exactly what you want. Now, that doesn't take cost into equation here, but it does show us what's the better way to go based on the complexity of what we're dealing with and the better outcome on the path we're choosing. So beyond just the technology, SAMA is backed by 26 different scanning technologies and allows us to peer beyond just the technology. So obviously we can't show you customer data here, but here's Bitcoin. It was scanned a few years ago, just showing you that 781 individuals or processes contribute to Bitcoin, okay? And if I were to ask you a simple question, who are you going to choose to help you modernize Bitcoin if you were ever chosen to do that, right? So we know that 51% of Bitcoin is written by 4 people. And if you're going to choose, you hopefully choose one of those 4 people to be on that team because they know the most about it. And so that's what SAMA does beyond the technology, which is says, who knows the most about it? How can we optimize it and make it more efficient? And so we're looking at things like cognitive and cyclomatic complexity, like we talked about, but many other things. All right, we're looking at, okay, now that we know who is on the team, who should be on the teams, we can automate that across the entire portfolio. So we know these are the resources that need to be on this per organization we're working with. So you could have a team of 1,000 developers and 3,000 applications, like I talked about before, and you need to turn around and build teams, modernization teams, or we call them 2 pizza teams, which you probably hear Amazon talk about, right? To help you, this will happen automatically. So we'll actually show you, here's the people that contributed the most to these applications, who know the most about it, And if you're going to optimize to maybe to cloud, for example, here are the roles and responsibilities required to be able to do that. And that's obviously your prerogative to hire those individuals to help you be more efficient across each of those applications. Okay, so you may have, like I said, 3,000 applications, and you're going to get a few teams that are going to be able to show you how to go through that modernization process and the people that should be on those teams as well. We also look at something called symmetric analysis, okay? And symmetric analysis is really important because nobody knows necessarily, unless you're a developer, how complicated something is unless you really look at it. And I'm showing you a PHP application that we scanned earlier last year. And you can see the complexity of these modules and how this thing works internally is more complicated than something that is a little more symmetric, right? And so we call this symmetric analysis because you can look at this and you can say, that's probably spaghetti code. That's probably really complicated. Let's not consider microservices decomposition, okay? But we can do something like this job application showing you that symmetric analysis is a better candidate right here, in this case, for decomposition for microservices, right? And I'm not saying microservices in the instances of things like, containers or serverless necessarily. It could be any of those, not just one. And so we're just giving a holistic lens into all of these different aspects of an application. So we can show you that this Prometheus auto configuration module can be likely decoupled out as a microservice. Could be a Lambda function, could be a cloud function in any cloud. It could be a container, EKS, LKS, GKE, you name all the KEs right out there, right? There's a lot. You could put them in a container if you wanted to. It's just an option showing you that complexity. We also look at all of the inventory. So we'll show you how it's written, what are the recommendations for modernization. And what I'm trying to show you and paint a picture for you is we're trying to replace all of those conversations that we talked about earlier, right? So we have security issues we detect. And that's not to replace any kind of security posture you have today. We're looking at the applications through the source code, and we're saying, what are the security issues? What are the technology sets that are in it? What's the complexity associated with it? Who the people who developed it? Lots of things, including authentication mechanisms, clear text passwords, to all of it, right? 12-factor methodology, you've heard of that, all that's in it. So that is really important to get a holistic understanding of your data actually of your applications, so you have a data-centric view of modernization. Most people and most organizations go through modernization with I think I can do this, or I think this makes sense here, but it's not always data-driven. And likewise, if it is data-driven, guess what? You're talking to the teams that may or may not have your best interests at heart, because the developer may not be able to tell you everything because they are new to it and they didn't write it initially, right? So that's also an important aspect to keep in mind. So this is an important slide. If you remember nothing about SAMA today, is this one, which is SAMA is different in terms of speed to market for modernization. We can analyze thousands of applications, okay, and do it in about 2 to 3 weeks on average, and that's per environment. So you could have a mainframe, you could have an AS400, you could have a cloud instances across any cloud for your applications there, and have stuff in the data center. Each one of those is 3 weeks on average for us to do the assessment and get you a holistic understanding of what you're dealing with. All right. So if a picture's worth 1,000 words, here's a really good example of that. Each one of these rows is an application with SAMA, showing you just a modernization portfolio view and showing you that each number represents a darker shade, and those darker shades speak to the complexity of those particular applications. Okay. And so we can look at the portfolio in this 50 set of applications and see where the gotchas are, where your organization is going to run into problems, or where if you decide to hire somebody to come in, where they're going to run into problems. But we can also tell you, wait for it, who should be involved in it, and if they're going to be successful or not based on one metric, just one of the 26, which is cognitive complexity. We do this different than anybody in the industry. So I'm going to touch on this one really quickly. Cognitive methodology or cognitive complexity here is basically how we look at keywords in a language, okay? So if you've got Java and you've got 50 keywords in Java, if the developers use 40 out of the 50 keywords, then we say that you're have almost mastered that language in that particular application, and therefore you must have a senior engineer on that because they've written with a lot of keywords in that language. And so the higher the count there, the more the more complicated it is because they've used a lot of keywords for each of those applications in many instances. And so I know for this one down here at the bottom, this application, this one's really complicated. If I'm going to put somebody on this one that's going to modernize this one, it's going to be very difficult for somebody junior to come in and work on that application. Okay. So whether you hire somebody internally as a W-2 or you hire somebody externally as a consultant, it's really going to be complicated regardless of who you bring in there. Okay. So let's look at what is important now. So now that you've got all the data, and SAMA, by the way, is not just heat mapping. It does a lot of things. We can certainly provide more detail later on, but obviously there's a lot here to consume. We're saying that we show what's technically feasible, right? What is technically possible based on the portfolio sizes we're dealing with. And because of that, your business or agency is going to have to look and say, you know what? We have a priority. These 10 applications are really important to our business. We want to modernize these. What does SAMA say about if it's technically feasible or not? And those two come together, and guess what? A roadmap is born from that. And that roadmap, guess what? It changes because you can't say, I'm going to have a 5-year roadmap when in reality, the technology changes underneath you and the complexity and the resources change underneath you. We can actually adjust that and show you over time using SAMA to continuously scan that to show you the complexity as you move forward with modernization. So that's really ultimately comes down to this one final slide here for you, which is that SAMA is an autonomous scanning technology that scans through applications in lightning speed across 26 different dimensions to produce different reports for modernization and road mapping. And ultimately, it can work on any environment. So we're going to have an executive level summary that shows the complexity of the whole portfolio. This includes the heat maps we've shown you already, includes all the resources about who's developing on what applications, the complexity, both cognitive, psychomatic, the contributors, basically anything related to the overall portfolio is in that executive summary. On the right, it's per application or per module or per library, and it obviously depends on what environment. So if you got a library on a mainframe, we're going to show you the library complexity or the modules in COBOL, or if it's applications on distributed, we're going to show you the application complexity. And all that is actually next steps on modernization. This is going to include things like 12-factor methodology, security vulnerabilities, cyclomatic and cognitive complexity for decomposition, to moving and migrating based on the complexity of who's working on these systems, and on and on and on. A lot of different things there in that one, but ultimately that is ultimately what SAMA provides. We do this for clients every day. We work with folks in the DoD to any vertical in the any economy really, from insurance and banking and you name it, every single day. And so this is trusted by a lot of our companies that we work with every day to provide them the next steps in tracking the traceability of modernization moving forward. So that is SAMA in a nutshell. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sebastian, and he's going to walk through IBM's take on modernization and how they go about doing that as well. So Sebastian.
Thank you very much. Let me know if you see my screen before I start.
Got it.
Okay, so thank you very much for your attention today. I'm going to talk very quickly about our view on Java application modernization. And in order to start this conversation, I want to mention just a couple of data points from analysts. The first one coming from IDC that talks about the huge amount of new applications that are expected for the upcoming years. And something that is very relevant, and that is that Java is still the most important language when we talk about enterprise application development, as you can see here in this statistics from Stack Overflow. The second data point is from a Gartner study. Almost half of the CIOs that were interviewed in the study indicated that they are planning to innovate and modernize enterprise applications within the next 12 months. So in summary, Java application modernization is something that has been around in every company for many, many years, but suddenly is demanding more urgent attention. And what's the reason why? Well, basically, this is linked to the fact of Java 8 going end of support end of community support by 2026, end of extended support by 2030. And more important, this is not just Java, but all the frameworks that use Java 8 as, for example, Spring or Spring Boot, that will also gonna be end of community support very soon. So customers are taking action on these facts and want to move their legacy application, their monoliths, to newer Java version and to newer runtimes. So how do we see this transformation journey? We have been working in many customers along the years, and the way this goes is typically by a customer with a set of Java applications running on different application servers. And the first step in order to start working on modernization is to have a clear view of the customer environment, how many applications they have, how those applications behave, etc. And once you have this picture, this view of the customer environment, you need to start prioritizing. What are you going to do with different kind of applications? For certain, you will not be moving all the existing applications to a newer environment or even to microservices and decomposing those applications. Probably many applications will stay as they are, and the focus will be how to provide support to those applications, while other applications will be probably moved to a modern runtime or rewritten or decomposed in microservices. And in order to do this, our main focus has been in providing the tooling for doing this application assessment, analysis, and prioritization. And for doing that, we have two tools, one called Transformation Advisor and a newer version called Application Modernization Accelerator. I will be talking about these two in a minute. And in the case of having to rewrite code and trying to, modernize code, we have a Watson Code Assistant and generative AI coming into our help of our customers, providing the right tools for speeding up code development and testing and all that stuff. And along this journey, the customer will decide where they will decide to end with their application. Some application, as I said, will be probably kept into their Java 8 environment, and we will be providing customers with tools for supporting those environments, besides this fact of the community retiring support to the environments. But other applications will be moved to Java 17 or newer versions. Some applications will stay on-premise or move to the cloud, even move to a managed cloud. And many applications will probably stay on VMs or move to containers. These are different options or different landing zones, as we like to call them, for applications that nowadays are running on traditional application server, monolithic applications on older Java versions. So if we had to summarize all this, we can say that our approach is to guide customers to maintain what you can in your existing environment, modernize what you must modernize in order to grow your business, and build the new applications either in a modern runtime on the new architecture such as microservices to address your client needs. In order to do this, we provide customers with tools and applications and things that can help move in this direction. You might probably have heard about our Cloud for Applications offering. We have been talking and doing a lot around this last year. Here, as a quick summary, Cloud Pak for Application provide you the runtimes you need to run the new applications, provide you with the tooling to move the applications to those runtimes, and OpenShift as a platform to deploy those applications wherever you want, either on your prem, on the cloud, or in a hybrid environment. Last year, during the fourth quarter, we announced to the market what we call Enterprise Application Services for Java, which is basically a platform as a service where you can deploy your Java applications in a cloud and have those applications be managed by IBM. You only need to worry about coding the application, testing the application, and then deploying those applications in the cloud. And our new member in this suite that we call generally JSphere Suite for Java is called Enterprise Application Runtimes, or EAR. and I'm going to mention a little bit more of detail about this, as this is something new. In this new component, we will be providing open source library support for Java, so customers can stay on Java 8 using older frameworks without any support issue. We're going to be providing the runtimes they need to run their applications, traditional WebFear, Liberty, JBoss, or Quarkus. We will allow customers to run Java 17 applications inside a WebFear ND cell by a tool called More. And we're going to be offering tooling, I mentioned Transformation Advisor and AMA, to speed up this migration process and movement to newer platforms. But of course, customer will be choosing the right strategy based in a balance and analysis of many different factors, such as their business goals, organizational capabilities, the kind of platform of choice they decide to use in order to deploy their applications, cost, performance, skills, and many others. So main point to mention here is there's not a one solution fits all the needs, and that's the reason why we are offering this suite, these different kind of solutions and portfolio in order to address all these different landing zones or possibilities in this migration journey. But let me focus at least a couple of minutes on the tooling, because efficient application modernization requires access to the right tools. And in order to do that, we from IBM provide a couple of very efficient tools, such as the WebFear Migration Toolkit for Application Binaries and Transformation Advisor, in order to address these first initial steps of evaluating and getting an assessment of the customer environment and the application they have there, and providing guidelines on how to move those applications to new environments. But we also provide a tool called Mono to Micro that will help developers to decompose monolithic applications into microservices. And more recently, we added to this portfolio Watson Next Code Assistant that leverages artificial intelligence, generative artificial intelligence, to address all the code lifecycle management that is embedded in many of these modernization journeys. So let me focus just a little bit more on Transformation Advisor, which will probably be something of interest for you. This is a very interesting tool, very simple tool that helps you analyze all the applications you have in a set of application servers, might be IBM or JBoss or Oracle or Tomcat. You can get a clear picture of the applications you have there, and you're going to have an assessment of the complexity of those applications and an estimation of the effort that will be involved in moving those applications into a modern runtime. And you're going to be also getting recommendations on how to deal with this transformation effort while you move those applications from a traditional monolithic application server to a modern runtime such as WebFear Liberty. I'm going to show you a couple of screens of Transformation Advisor. In Transformation Advisor, you typically go to the application server, run some code in that application server, a piece of code called collector that will collect information about the applications you have in that application server, and then import this information into Transformation Advisor, where you get a screen like the one we are seeing in now, where you see in the upper left side of the screen the target you're going to be using as a landing zone for your applications. In this case, you can decide between using Open Liberty, WebFear Liberty, or WebFear Traditional. And then on the bottom of the screen, you're going to see a list of applications that were identified in the servers where you run the collector. And more important, an idea of the complexity of that application and how simple will be to move that application into that target environment. For example, applications can be categorized as simple, which means you do not need to make any code change, just configuration and deploy that application in new runtime. Applications can be categorized as moderate in terms of complexity. That means that you're going to need to do some changes, but changes are well known and well documented, and in many cases can be automated. And some applications can be categorized are complex, those will be the ones that probably have been developed many, many years ago, are using older frameworks and will probably need a complete rework, or just keep them as they are and provide Java 8 support for those applications. We have run Transformation Advisor in many, many customers against many, many applications. And just to give you a quick idea, this is a sample of about 3,600 applications. And of those applications, about 25% of them were categorized as simple. So it was very easy to move them to WebFIA Liberty, to a modern runtime. And one very important point here, when I said move to Liberty, you can move those applications to Liberty and continue running those applications on a virtual machine, or you can move that application to Liberty and deploy that application inside a container, either on Kubernetes or OpenShift. About 70% of the applications were categorized as moderate, and only 1% were complex ones, which meant that customer probably decided to keep those applications in their current environment and do not do any effort on them. Transformation Advisor provides you a detailed assessment for each one of the applications, guiding you on the things that need to be modified or corrected in order to modernize the applications. We'll provide you an inventory of the assets, including the application, technology reports, detailed analysis reports, and also information about potential issues that might impact the applications once moved to a modern runtime. And also very important, Transformation Advisor will provide you with a migration plan that will guide you on the journey to move from moving this application to your current environment to your new landing zone. And to expedite this process, Transformation Advisor will provide you with a set of artifacts or files that will allow you to very easily configure and deploy your target application server and deploy your applications. And I'm going to highlight this one more time. Transformation Advisor allow you to deploy these applications either on virtual machines, and that's the reason why you, for example, have here a POM file that will allow to use a build tool such as Maven to deploy the application, or you can use your application and deploy that application in a container environment, and Transformation Advisor will provide you the container file and the OpenShift YAML files that will be needed to deploy that application in Kubernetes or OpenShift. But in some cases, remember when we do this assessment and you prioritize applications to be moved to a new environment, in some cases, application is complex or you need to do some code modifications on the application. And in order to help you do that and to facilitate that process is where we can share with you watsonx Code Assistant. watsonx Code Assistant is our coding tool based on GenAI that will allow you to manage the whole application life cycle. And in particular, you're going to be able to do a set of very, very nice things with the code. For example, you will be able to open your code and chat with that code, ask Watson Code Assistant about information or explanations about your code. You can also have access to a prompt library with certain prompts already prepared for facilitate your conversation with your code. We have seen that many customers, for example, like to use watsonx Code Assistant to get access to a piece of code that is not well documented and use the tool to get an explanation of code functionality and even document the code the right way. And this is something that takes a lot of time in this modernization journeys, because in many cases customers are using code that's working perfectly fine, but the people that develop that code is not anymore in the company and code is not well documented. So having something such as Watson Code Assistant to help you in in explaining the code and documenting the code is really, really important. But also in this area of modernization, the fact that we have included in Watson X Code Assistant the ability to take an application and modernize that application to run directly on Liberty, or upgrade the Java version of an application, and take, for example, a Java 8 application and move that application to Java 17 or 11 or 21. That's really, really handy and can help a lot of time and effort in a modernization journey. So from the modernization perspective, I think that probably these two features I'm highlighting here, the ability to modernize to Liberty and the ability to upgrade to latest Java versions, will be the most significant for you when using Watson Code Assistant in this journey. Important to mention that in order to use this tool, you can choose the IDE of your choice. In this case, I'm just showing you Watson X Code Assistant plugin running on VS Code. You can also do the same on Eclipse, and IBM has planned to expand support for other frequently used IDEs in the market. Nowadays, you can do this in VS Code and Eclipse. And from your standard IDE, you can open your application and you can start chatting with the code, or decide to use Watson X Code Assistant to move your applications from Java 8 to the latest Java version. So to summarize a little bit of these things I've been covering quickly in this conversation, I think it's important, and everybody is probably well aware, that innovation and competitiveness demand agile and flexible applications. We have seen this a lot, especially during COVID, where companies were forced to modify their applications to be able to address new and innovative ways of addressing customer needs. And doing that in a monolithic application running on an old application server with code not well documented is something very difficult to be done. So that's where this push to modernization comes to play, and it's very significant for all the market. As I said, companies have been dealing with monolithic architectures from many years. We started deploying monoliths on Java in the early 2000s, and we have been doing so since then. But the fact that, for example, Java 8, that is widely spread in the market, recently we've seen a couple of stats saying that about 33% of the applications, the Java applications running nowadays, are still on Java 8. And Java 8 going end of community support by 2026 puts a critical milestone in front of us that we need to take care of. And in this context of needing to move applications to be more competitive and being able to support the latest Java versions and avoid compliance issues, the JSphere suite, which I tried to describe quickly before, based on our Cloud Pak for Applications, our EasyJ, our new enterprise applications runtimes offerings, will provide you with the options needed to deploy your applications wherever you want, from VMs to containers to cloud native, in a more efficient and quick way. So, having said this, I will turn back to Greg, and probably we can have some questions and answers from here. Greg?
Perfect. Thank you, Sebastian. Yep. So I think now is a good point to kind of turn over to Kim. Kim, do you have any questions for us?
Yeah, we just have one question. The question is, can SAMA be used to track modernization progress?
Yes, we covered that a little bit in the presentation, but ultimately, yes, that's true. We can track the efficiency of modernization across every portfolio, right? So whether it's mainframe, AS400, distributed applications in the data center or in cloud, we could do all of that and continuously track that progression over time to make sure it's cost efficient and effective.
Great. Well, since that's our only question, I will leave it to y'all. Do you have any final thoughts, Greg or Sebastian?
I think one of the cool things too about Transformation Advisor and SAMA, how they work together, is SAMA can actually show the trajectory of where a portfolio can go. And they, based on the data, it says, hey, well, transformation is a really good candidate for using that with Watson Code Assist and some other things to make it more efficient as you progress forward. I think those two tools kind of work really well together. And I think it's a really effective combo for a lot of our clients. So
I was about to comment something very similar. I think both provide a good combination of tooling and methodology to address these modernization efforts. And again, keeping in mind that there is not a one solution fits all, but you need to be very careful on how to define your goals and your journey based on business needs and priorities, and especially organizational readiness for handling the new workloads in the new environment.
Great. Well, I want to thank both of our hosts again. Sebastian Porro, he's Principal Automation Technical Specialist for Application Development at IBM, and Greg Peters, Chief Innovation Architect for Software Engineering at CDW. Thanks for your time, for joining us today. We really appreciate it. If you would take a minute to fill out that survey at the end, that'd be much appreciated. Other than that, we hope you have a great day. Thanks again.
Thanks for attending. Have a good day.